Okay, so the last thing which we have left is the skull. And for the skull, we are going to do something different. It's mostly going to be the same, but we are going to use brushes instead of generators or other procedures. So let's go in and just start with that. So first, for things organic, I won't say a skull is a bit organic, but maybe skull is a bit organic. But anyway, things like skull, face, skin, creature. I like to make my albedo first, which I mean I'm just gonna paint in my color, and we're gonna define our roughness afterwards. So we are not gonna paint in roughness in any of the fill layer right now. So this is gonna be our base. This is gonna be our base roughness. So let's go in, make the color a bit yellowish. Alright, so let's start using fill layer with brushes. So this is going to be our base. Add a fill layer, add a black mask, add a paint. Let's go to our brushes, and you guys have all of these brushes to pick from. Same as in ZBrush, just because you have access to all of these does not mean you have to use all of these for every specific condition. I would say find your favorite ones and you can use those brushes for different things as well. Like even in ZBrush, you use 4 or 5 brushes, not more than that. Occasionally more than that. So my favorite and this one is artistic print, and it's right here, cotton and dirt too. So let's go in and pick cotton and make our fill layer a bit dark yellow. So I'm going to pick in the color which we have on the bottom. I'm going to go in, make it a bit saturated and a little bit darker. And in the paint, I'm just going to go in, paint in these guys. Right now I'm painting my roughness too, so let's disable them. For our paint, let's go in and hand paint these guys. If I press X, I can take those away. So right now I'm not thinking much, I'm just adding some color breakups to make my sculpt look more interesting. If you guys want to follow the original concept of skull or the concept which this character was made of, feel free to. The method's gonna be the same. You're gonna create a fill layer, give it a color and paint in those areas. So using the pen and substance, using this cotton one, right now what I'm doing, since my pressure sensitivity is on for opacity, I'm mostly tapping in my brush to get a softer paint in. So it's kind of like using cotton in practical makeup effects. If you see some artists do that, you might have seen them just taking a brush or taking a cotton piece and just tapping that on their sculpt in real life. So that's kind of the same effect I'm trying to get here. So just a slight bit breakup of our albedo here and there. I think in the final one his hair was covered, so I never textured this part. But let's go in and texture on this one. So some of these parts are supposed to be flesh instead of skull. So let's go in, add some red or purple in that area. So let's start with the red. Let's disable everything, add a black mask, and gonna do the same thing. Just tap it in. So I'm just gonna describe where those areas might be. Let's decrease the opacity, so we just have a subtle hint of that color there, something like that. All right, last layer would be the teeth. Let's say he hasn't been brushing or something, so he should brush maybe. Anyway, so let's make this a bit yellow-ish. Add a black mask, add a paint. I'm gonna do the same thing. Just take this brush, make it smaller. Tap, tap, tap. If I feel like the color of that yellow should be different, since we are making that in a mask, I can just go in and change the color. Maybe this much, or maybe just a slight bit darker. Something like that. Okay. One more thing that I'm gonna do is utilize my AO map. So if I create a fill layer, add a black mask, I can go and add a bitmap mask. And if I scroll down, I should be able to find out my skull AO. Let's use that. Alt click so you can see what our AO is doing. So it's just using our AO as a mask. Let's add a level, invert it, so all the white part are gonna be visible. Let's change our level. I'm just gonna make in those parts a bit more darker. I'm gonna duplicate this. I'm gonna change my level. I just want to get my nose, this area, to be a bit more darker than other ones. So I'm gonna add a paint, make it multiply, zoom out, press 4, make it black, drag this, zoom in, and just paint in the inner part of the nose. The border in this one is a bit too perfect, so I'm just gonna go in our mask, add a filter, type in blur, and blur this out a bit. I'm gonna use in my AO map again. Let's do the same thing. Let's scroll down, add a AO, add a level, invert it, and instead of making it black, I'm just gonna make it a bit red-ish for the fleshy areas. Gonna darken it a bit more, something like that. Add a paint, zoom out, press 4, make it black, drag, press 1, zoom in, and just paint in some of those areas that we had. Make sure we are not painting any roughness. Sweet. Oh, make sure it's in multiply. There we go. And painting in those areas. Sweet. Gonna decrease the opacity. I can press C to go to my base color to see exactly what it's doing. I'm gonna decrease the opacity on the teeth as well. Hit M to see what our skull looks like. And I guess I'm fine with this one. So let's call it done. One last thing in this video I want to show you guys is particle brushes. So I'm quickly gonna go over them. If I create a fill layer, add a black mask, add a paint, I can go to particles, and we have all of these particles to mess with. So if I double click on this, instead of your usual common brush, these ones kind of have practical effect on them. So Rococo, again, I don't know how to pronounce that, but this gives me this effect. If I go to veins and click and hold, let's decrease the mouse size. It's gonna give me these kind of effects. Rain, as the name suggests, it's gonna drop in rain on your model, and it's gonna calculate the curvature to give you a rain effect. The more setting for these brushes can be found under FX. If I zoom down, under physics, you can find more scientific sliders under here. So just go in, play with them. If you feel like any of these is something which you want to get, like a fracture or something, this should work better in a glass. You can have those effects pretty much done by a computer rather than painting them by hand. Alright, so this is it. We have our character textured. So after our albedo and our skull was done, we're gonna go in and define the roughness of some elements on this character. So let's go to my skull again, group these guys, and name this one albedo. Next up, we are only gonna deal with roughness. We're not gonna do anything with metal because the skull is not going to be metallic at any point. So for the roughness, let's pick in a base roughness, maybe something like this. Add one more layer. So I'm gonna make the teeth less rough. Add a black mask, add a paint. Let's go in. That's the wrong brush. So I'm gonna go to my brush again, pick in our cotton. The same way which we did with the albedo, just go in, tap in, and we're gonna change the roughness for the teeth. Maybe we wanna change the roughness here as well. And still, if I feel like that's too much or that's too less, since it's completely non-destructive, I can always change that. Alright, so one last thing that I forgot was we forgot to add a universal dirt in our character. So let's go in and do that. So under torso, I'm going to create a fill layer, add it in a group, add a black mask, name it universal dirt. Let's go to our smart mask, type in dirt. I'm gonna pick something like dust dirty, drag and drop, and this dirt is applying everywhere. That's a bit too much. So let's go in, change the settings, alright, make our fill layer a bit darker and a bit rougher. For our color, I'm gonna decrease the opacity so it's not too pronounced. But now we have a universal dirt that's affecting the whole character. One last thing I want to show you guys before I end this is something like how substance make ground dirt or something. So if I create a fill layer, add a black mask, add a generator. If I click on generators, we have a generator called light. So what this does, it projects a light from a angle, and every part that the light touches gets white and every part it does not gets black. So to make it more pronounced, let's make it red, super rough, And this is where you control the light direction. So I can change it to change the light direction to get something like that. So what substance does to get a ground dirt or a dirt that sits down from top to bottom is it uses a light and projects a mask that goes from bottom to up. So it has a mask and it changes with the gradient, multiplies that with different masks to get something out of it. Few ways which you can use it for your benefit is if you notice on your day-to-day things, the dust gets settled on everything that's parallel to the ground. Let's say a simple table. Everything that's parallel to the ground, the dirt will get settled there. Instead of painting everything by hand, you can assign a light generator. Make sure your light is affecting from the top. If I alt click, I can actually see what my mask is doing. So everywhere which might be perpendicular to the ground and the light is directly, wait, hold on. The dust gets settled everything that's parallel to the ground and the light is perpendicular to the ground right now. So it's making everything white which is parallel to the ground. So it's a pretty quick and easy way to get dirt in your character or any other asset that you're doing which might be sitting on the ground for a while. Alright, that was the last thing for our character in this week. Alright, so let's look up what we have on the next chapter.